Hey guys, I want to talk to you a little bit about naming ionic and covalent bonds. Um, Today we're going to focus on naming ionic bonds. So it's really important that you know the difference because each type of bond has different naming rules. So if we don't know if our bond is ionic or covalent, it's going to be hard to decide which rules to name our bond with. So the first thing we have to do is decide, is our bond ionic or covalent? So we can look at two formulas right here. And we can tell if it's ionic or covalent by first asking ourselves, is there a metal in it or is it two nonmetals? So let's look at it. NaCl. NaCl is sodium and chlorine. I have Na and Cl. So since one of my elements is on this side of the table with a positive charge, that means that is ionic. Okay? Metal and a nonmetal. Na is in group 1. Cl is the nonmetal in group 17. Then I have S and O. So I'm going to go right here, and I know S has a negative charge, O has a negative charge, both on the same side, both nonmetals. That's going to be covalent. And remember, covalents share electrons because these are all the same. They both need electrons, so they don't have any to give. They have to share their electrons. So first decide if it's ionic or covalent, and then we'll use the naming rules we're about to talk about. The first naming rule is how to name ionic bonds. So we're not just going to be looking at the formula and going to the name. We're also going to be having to use the name to get to the formula. So be sure you keep these rules separate. Go back and refer to this. So when you think, okay, is my bond ionic or covalent? Go back to these rules and say, all right, if it's ionic, I'm going to do it this way. If it's covalent, I'm going to do it this way. So first, if we're naming an ionic bond, that means we look at the chemical formula or the name and we see calcium chloride. So first of all, I'm thinking, is this ionic or covalent? So I come here, I see calcium is in group 2, chlorine is in group 17. They're on opposite sides of the table, opposite charges. So I'm knowing that's ionic. So the first thing when we're naming an ionic compound is we name the metal first. So I'm going to name my metal calcium first. I'm going to write that down. Then I need the second part. And so ionic is pretty simple. All we do is take the first part of the word and put IDE on the end. So this is chlorine. So I'm going to do chloride, calcium chloride. So I name the metal, first part of this nonmetal, and put "ide" on the end. So calcium chloride. So right here I named the metal sodium, first part of the second nonmetal, and then we're going to put chloride. Okay, so now let's say we want to go backwards. Let's say I give you the name, but I want the formula. So this is a little bit trickier. In ionic, we know that it's a metal and a nonmetal, and we know that calcium and chlorine have charges above them that are opposite. So we need to do something with that because that's the whole thing about ionic bonding is they have opposite charges. So the first thing we're going to do is find the charges of each. So we know it's calcium and chlorine. So I'm going to come here and I see calcium has a positive 2, chlorine has a -1. So I go positive 2, -1, and I switch them. So I can drop the negative and the positive when I switch them, but you cannot leave them the same. It's very tempting to just put the 2 right here and the 1 right here. But we don't do that. We switch them because when they bond, they transfer their electrons or their charge. So we write the opposite charge as a subscript. So we're going to go Ca. It used to have the 2. Now it's going to get the 1 because we crisscross them. The chlorine that used to have the 1 is going to get the 2. So whenever you see something with nothing behind it, that implies that it's 1. We don't need to write Ca1, Cl2. We're just going to have the 2 there as a subscript. So let's do some examples. Right here you can see I did the first one for you. I took these puzzle pieces and I made lithium, that's my metal, and oxygen. I made them fit. So I can go to my periodic table. I wrote my metal was lithium, my non-metal was oxygen, and now I want the compound. So how did I come up with this formula? Well, first you could look at it and say, okay, well, I have 2 lithiums and 1 oxygen, so that's how. But there's another way too. So I can see that lithium has a charge of +1, oxygen has a charge of -2. So if lithium has a charge of +1 and oxygen has a -2, when we switch them, lithium gets the 2, oxygen gets the 1. Okay, so let's try it again. Let's say I take magnesium. I drag it up here. And remember, you can use anything that'll bond. You can use anything that fits in these puzzle pieces. But let's say I use magnesium and chlorine. Got to fit it there perfectly. Okay. So the name of my metal is going to be magnesium. The name of my nonmetal is chlorine. So we need to cross the charges. So I see right here magnesium has a +2. So I'm actually going to write that out beside magnesium. Magnesium has a +2 charge. Chlorine has a -1 charge. So we're going to do -1. Okay, and we're going to switch those charges. So now Mg is going to get the 1, so I don't have to write anything. And chlorine is going to get the 2. And if we hit Control plus, so you can just write it like this if you want to, because I know it's hard to do that. But if you hit Control plus, it'll allow you to write the little 2, or it should. Or maybe I highlight it. Hit Control plus. I don't know. Anyways, don't worry about it. Just MgCl2. I'll know what you mean. Okay, so let's try another one. If we have sodium, let's say sodium is going to be our metal. And then I'm going to have, maybe then I want oxygen. Well, that's not going to work because I have an extra space here, so I'm going to use another sodium. So now I'm going to have sodium. I'm going to go ahead and figure out the charge first, sodium. And my charge on sodium is +1. So sodium has a +1 charge. And then oxygen right here. Okay, and oxygen has a, if we look, a -2 charge. So what I'm going to do is I need to switch them. Remember, an ionic, they transfer their electrons. So I'm going to have Na, and it's going to get oxygen's little charge of 2. And then I'll have O, and it would get the 1. But I don't need to write the 1 behind it because that's assumed. Okay, so go ahead and do 2 more of those where you drag the metal and the non-metal and put those there. Okay, and so that is all for how to name ionic bonds.